Good morning. Make sure we're all set up here. And I think this is working. Yeah. So do you know anybody? I've got a couple of very difficult questions for you. Do you know anybody that is making a 5-year plan so they can go bankrupt in 5 years? Well, do you know anyone that's doing something stupid on purpose so they will ruin their marriage or get fired? I mean, they're really planning on it, putting elaborate thought into everything. I've got to make sure I get fired here. Do you know anybody that just plans, on purpose, plans to wreck their life? Because that's silly, isn't it? A lot of people do those things, but they don't. No one here today is planning to make stupid decisions. And folks that don't know the Lord, they're no different. They have dreams and goals just like we do. And they want to realize success and enjoy their lives. And no one plans to make stupid mistakes. This isn't how, it's hardly worth mentioning. But wise people, God's people, do something different. So no one plans to make stupid mistakes. But God's people, we do something that's not quite as common. We make plans not to make stupid mistakes. Last week, we talked about the power of pre-deciding. There's so much power in thinking things through and coming up with decisions for specific situations that we inevitably will run into. And so we talked about the quality of your decisions determines the quality of your life. You make decisions, and then your decisions make you. They're going to define you. They're going to set a path in front of you with consequences. You make decisions, and then your decisions, they make you. It's just how life works. We can read about that. And God says in Galatians chapter 6 that you're going to reap what you sow. So if you reap good things, if you sow good things, then you're going to gather in good things. You reap evil, you sow evil, and you're going to reap evil. But we make decisions, and then our decisions make us. So the goal is to make the best decisions we can be. In fact, to even anticipate. And I put this up, no markers. They're probably hidden around here somewhere. Anyway, there are things that are going to happen in your life that you can anticipate. Maybe you're having a family reunion. You have one every year. And there's just certain things you can count on happening because they always have. So wisdom that we get from the Bible says, okay, we're going to anticipate certain things happening. If this happens, I've already pre-decided that this is how I'm going to react. If there's a yelling match in the family, if this is the situation, this is how I'm going to react. If I'm running really late for work, a lot of options, right? Call the boss, say I'm sick today, or got a flat tire, or speed really fast, or call the boss and say, I am so sorry. Running late today. I'll be there in about 15 minutes. But everything that there are certain things we can plan on happening, and we want to pre-decide on the ones that are filled with temptation. Pre-decide on the ones that we might be tempted to do something different than God would want us to do. So the quality of our decisions determines the quality of our life. We talked about that last week. We don't want to make decisions based upon what feels good in the moment. That's why we pre-decide. Because in the moment, I'm faced with such and such, we don't have time to calmly, logically, and faithfully think through all of our options. So we might choose something emotionally that we wouldn't choose if we had taken the time to pre-decide. The other thing is this. There are going to be unexpected situations as well, right? If we could all anticipate everything that's going to happen, we'd be multimillionaires. We'd know how to invest our money and make all kinds of great choices. But there are going to be plenty of decisions. Life's not easy. Plenty of decisions that are going to catch us off guard. The unexpected situation. But not only when we pre-decide things, but when we have clarified what's important, when we have clarified what's valuable to us, hopefully the same thing that's valuable to God, our decisions are a lot easier. So even the unexpected situation, boom, I know how I have to handle this. I will handle it in the right way that God would be pleased with. All right, so today, our intro has two main points. So in our introduction to kind of lead to the sermon, the devil is coming for us. That's point number one. He's coming for us. And you might say, duh, just like my silly opening question, but sometimes we forget that we're in a raging battle. Although we can't hear the sounds of the cannons or see the swing of the sword coming at us or the arrows in the air, he's coming for us. 2 Corinthians 9:11, 2 Corinthians 9a, and the first half of it, and then verse 11, Paul says, for this is why I wrote. And he's telling us, I'm writing you for a very specific reason. Verse 11, so that we would not be outwitted by Satan. We are not ignorant of his designs. Hopefully you all know this, but Satan has a real plan. He's amazingly powerful, far more than we are. And he wants your soul, and he wants your soul and my soul, and he's not sitting back. He's like a roaring lion seeking whom to devour. We're told that later in 1 Peter, I believe. I've just forgotten. But Paul said, don't be outwitted, don't be outfooled, don't be deceived by Satan. We are not ignorant of his designs. We're not ignorant, unaware of his method, how much he wants us, and some of the ways he uses to win us. The second point is this: we're not as strong as we think. There is a scientific phrase, I love using them because it kind of makes things clearer sometimes, but those people that study the mind say that human beings have a restraint bias. We think we're stronger than we are. So we say, oh, you know, I can go with my buddies to the club and I'll be okay. And hey, I have family members that think that. And they fail every single time. Not immediate brothers and sisters, but people in the family. Oh, I can handle it now. I've really grown. I've really grown in Christ, and I'm okay now. So they go to the club again. And maybe they don't come home for 2 days. But they think they can handle it, so they keep doing it. And we have our talks, and oh no, you know, I'm better now. And restraint bias. For me, it's the Sumner potlucks, right? Okay, hey, you know, I'll be careful. I won't overdo it. But man, that dessert table that you all prepare, it calls my name. It draws me in, and I'll just have a little. Oh, that was too good, and it's called restraint bias, where we think we are stronger than we are, and so there are things we can do to protect ourselves. But those are some of the points that we're leading to, and a verse that goes along with that is this: 1 Corinthians 10:12. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed that it does not fall. Kind of archaic English, but it's saying this: the person thinks is really strong. He who thinks he stands, I'm right with God. That can get me off course. I'm just like Apostle Peter. It says, take heed. It means to be very careful because you're in danger. If you think you stand, you better watch it, because you could fall. Take heed that it does not fall. So here's our lesson. We're going to talk about 3 ways to overcome temptation. Bummer that I still need this. Been a Christian a long time, but still need these things. And here are the 3 main points. We need to move the line. We need to count the cost and then magnify it. And lastly, we need to plan our escape. So that's the lesson that we'll be looking at today. So moving the line. Here's a question that I've asked. Lots of Christians have asked. How close to the line can I get? How close to the line can I get without sinning? Am I okay? If this is sin and this is not, how close? I mean, look, we don't want to give up freedom that unnecessarily, right? So how close to the line can I get? So take dating, for instance. I was a new Christian when I started dating Lisa. And kissing her was intoxicating. We both, and I was looking for a woman to date and to marry that was zealous for God, and she was. We both wanted to be right with God. We wanted to be able to tell our children, we made it. We held back. As tough as that is, we know what you're going through, but we made it. We stayed pure. But kissing her, like I said, was intoxicating to me. When you're intoxicated, your judgment isn't as good. Something else is influencing it, taking it over. So we pre-decided to move the line. Not here. How close can we get without sinning? We pre-decided, and we dated a long time, almost a year and a half, a year and a quarter, that we would not kiss anymore. Stopped kissing. Maybe a peck at the doorway. Good night, honey. But we said, no kissing. And I couldn't handle it. I knew that it would lead to trouble if we kept doing that. So here's the line. Maybe you don't need this line, but I did. So to avoid temptation, sometimes it's best to move the line. To move it. And Bailey, who's with us today, Bailey Osborne, he's an airline pilot. And you want the same idea when you're flying an airplane. He's qualified for multi-engine airplanes, by the way. I guess he's been pre-hired, if I can use that term, by Horizon. He is or will be commercially flying soon. So ask him, so Bailey, how close to the mountains do you get? How close to the trees do you get when you're flying your plane? Do you try to get like within 10 feet because it's pretty exciting and you might be able to see a raccoon in the tree? How close do you get? Do you think he gets as close to the FAA tower that he can, or the mountains or the trees? And how about fuel, by the way? So let's say you're going back east like you did a few months ago. You're going back east and it takes exactly 172 gallons of fuel to get there. How much do you take with you? 172 and a half? You're getting close. Why take extra fuel? To slow the plane down. How close? How much fuel do you take? You move the line and say, 172 gallons, but what if we hit a storm that we have to go around and it takes extra miles? What if we're into an unexpected headwind and so it takes more fuel to get to our destination? And so not only is Bailey a pilot, but he teaches flying in Puyallup. He's an instructor, flight instructor. And I've never asked him the questions, but I know he doesn't get as close as he possibly can to objects that don't move. And I know he takes spare fuel. So that's what we're talking about in the Christian life. We don't get as close to the line. Now, if you're a long-time Bible student, yeah, I know the Pharisees. They were famous for building fences that weren't there, that God didn't build. They made things up. They moved the line, and they said, oh, you know, you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, so we're going to make up a law that says you can only go 7/8 of a mile on the Sabbath. If you go more than that, you're sinning, and we're going to stone you to death. You die. They made it up. There's no law in the Old Testament telling how far a person can walk. And so if a Pharisee or somebody else, a faithful Jew, says, you know, I want to please God. If this is the line and I'm not exactly sure where it is, I'm going to please God with my attitude. And I'll make sure that I don't overdo it. I won't go on a 20-mile hike on the Sabbath. But the problem with the Pharisees, they put up fences that God didn't, and they told you had to obey them. They told you have to wash your hands before you eat. Now, it's a good idea. That's great hygiene, right? To wash your hands before you eat. But if you didn't, they got on your case, and it wasn't required by God to do this ceremonial washing. So how close do you get? Well, move the line so that it takes away the temptation. It's a lot safer over here. But that's for you. That's your personal judgment. You live by it, but you don't force others to. So I'm acknowledging that. Move the line for your sake. You know what tempts you and what doesn't. You know what man is attractive and that isn't good for you and what isn't. Move the line when you need to. So we're going to talk about a couple examples of pre-deciding here. So let's say that you're one of the people, because a lot of Americans do this, you spend 4 hours a day on Facebook or Instagram. Well, you may have really interesting friends, but I don't think they're that interesting. There's probably better ways to honor God with your time than spending 4 hours on Instagram or Facebook. But let's say that that's a temptation for you. Move the line, you know. Set a time limit. Now, my son, I've told you this before, but Dad, you got to play this, whatever they call it, a video game where, you know, it's not linear. You can make lots of choices and you have lots of freedoms. You got to play this game. There's a name for it. And, and man, okay, I won't watch any TV. I'll play an hour. So I'm playing. I look down 3 hours. More than once. I said, love the game, man. It pulls me in. It takes every bit of my thought, every bit of my concentration, and all this kind of thing. Role-playing, is that what they call it? A role-playing game? It doesn't matter. I said, that ain't going to work. So for me, I set an alarm. I said, I will play for an hour, period. When the alarm goes off, I have 2 minutes to finish the scene I'm in or whatever. Done. But set an alarm. Another example. Maybe someone has trouble overspending on Amazon. Give your spouse your password. Just say, hey, I won't buy anything on Amazon unless you open it for me. Even if you had the password yourself, give her the password, because she's going to know if you cheated or not. She's going to know if the package comes in, if you kept your word or not. So move the line if you need to. Maybe you don't need to. I'm not tempted to buy a lot of things on Amazon, but some people are. I won't get drunk again. Well, what's causing you to get drunk? Maybe you need to change your friends. That's what did it for me. I told you before, I was a bartender. I drank way too much. And it didn't stop until I moved and changed my friends and said, I'm not going to miss another service, another assembly of our congregation, unless it's just impossible for you to make it. You know, I'm sick or whatever. But move that line. Change your friends. I've had a prison ministry, and what keeps a lot of the people repeating their mistakes? They don't change their friends. I would tell them that. Those that changed their friends usually stopped committing crimes and didn't go back to jail. Those that didn't change their friends, I can't think of an exception. I think 100% of them that did not change their friendships ended up back in prison again. So move the line. Maybe you struggle with immorality, a problem among believers across the nation. 25% of all preachers, pastors, ministers, 1 out of 4. I can't remember if they're addicted or if they look at pornography. Move the line. Get one of those programs that gives you an accountability partner that you know called Covenant Eyes. And anytime you're on the internet, I don't know how it works specifically, but I think it informs them either when you look at things you shouldn't be looking at, or maybe it tells them at any time what you're looking at. But move the line. Pre-decide. There's great power in pre-deciding. So put distance between me and the temptation. So isn't that kind of restrictive, though? I mean, man, isn't that just overkill? Restrictive. It's freeing. It's freeing. Jesus says, if you're my disciples, then you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Get rid of all those things that pull us into the sewer. In Psalms 1, the question, isn't that restrictive? David wrote Psalm 16, and he said, the boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. I will praise the Lord who counsels me. So the boundary lines that God gives, that's what David's talking about. The good, the pleasant for me, I enjoy my life. His word directs me. They fell in pleasant places. I have a delightful in there. What God gives me is awesome and good. Yeah, it takes self-control. Yes, it's hard. Sometimes I feel, oh, poor me, but a delightful inheritance. And he loved us so much, he says, I will praise Yahweh. That's what that word is. I will praise the Lord who guides me, who counsels me. You know, Solomon tried just about every kind of sin there was. Tells us from experience. If you read the book of Ecclesiastes, he did it all, right? He says that it's vanity, it's deep emptiness. That's what living outside the will of God is, emptiness. And every command of God, every single one, thou shalt not do this, but do this. Every single command, there isn't an exception. Even the difficult ones, they're given to bless us. The commands are given to make us happier, stronger, healthier, with a sense of satisfaction. Every command is intended to be a blessing to us. Number 2. So the first one is move the line. Second way to avoid temptation is count the cost and magnify it. So in Luke 14, now Jesus is talking about becoming his disciple. So in Luke 14, and he has more to say, we're just looking at a little bit of it. Luke 14:27, he says, Jesus speaking, whoever does not carry his own cross, you've carried a Baskin Robbins ice cream cone, Kurt, right? Okay, pleasant. Does carrying a cross sound just pleasant? No. Whoever does not carry his own cross, that means the necessary things that you're going to have to endure to be a child of God. Even the suffering. Who does not carry his own cross and come after me, Jesus, cannot be my disciple. For which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? What? Christianity costs something? Now, you listen to the radio. If you visit other churches, they're going to say Christianity doesn't cost a thing. Nothing. Nothing you can do to lose your soul. It doesn't cost a thing. And they might even quote Romans 6:23, where the wages of sin are death, but the free gift of God is eternal life. What do you mean costs something? What do you mean count the cost? Well, Christianity absolutely costs something, but it's free. The poorest person on earth can become a Christian because God doesn't charge a penny, not a penny. Anybody can do it become one without paying something. It doesn't cost anything, but it does cost everything. Another paradox that fills the scriptures. Doesn't cost anything, but it costs everything. This applies, just like becoming a disciple of Jesus, applies to temptation. Every choice costs us something, everyone. Travis, I don't know what you do when you get home for fun, but if you choose to watch the Seahawks today on TV, that costs you something. You're paying with your time to watch this here, so you can't read, you can't talk with people, you can't spend lots of time on Facebook. Every choice we make costs something. If we choose to work out, we have a couple of people very dedicated to being fit and working out. We're giving up something else. We're giving up reading or socializing with people that aren't there. Choosing one thing eliminates the other things. It's that simple. So is Christianity free? Sure is. Does it cost anything? It costs everything. If you choose to be holy, we give up unrighteousness. You can't be both holy and unrighteous. If we choose to be forgiving, then we give up bitterness. You can't do both. Hold bitterness against somebody and forgive them at the same time. So it's free, Christianity, but it costs everything. And the same with temptation. Count the cost. Whatever we're tempted to do, there's a cost behind it. We're sacrificing something else instead. How many lives have you seen destroyed by sin? How many? I mean, even as a kid, even when I was in junior high, man, there was one guy named Willie. He's just an awesome guy, and from a very messed up family, but I was pulling for him. He's just a great guy. I watched him, I encouraged him, and watched him make the honor roll for the first time in his life. Maybe 8th grade, I'm not sure, 9th grade, but started messing with the wrong people, started running with the wrong crowd. And just life just went downhill. You can imagine what bad friends tempt you to do. He did those things. No, God wants us to be blessed, but every temptation has a cost behind it. So if you're tempted to sin, Satan wants you to minimize the risk. Oh yeah, Joel, listen. You really think you're going to get caught if you cheat on your taxes? It might save you $700. You really think? I mean, what are the chances? I mean, look, if all of our presidents, sorry about that. You think you're going to get caught? When we're tempted to do something ungodly, we normally do minimize the risk. We normally say, I won't get caught, or no big deal, or whatever. We minimize it because that's exactly Satan's scheme. If we don't really think through the potential risk, the potential danger and destruction, we're more likely to do it. So count the cost and magnify it. Be real. What's the worst case scenario for doing something that you're tempted to do that's against the will of God? Get drunk. You know, I may have been a member here. I don't know. I've been here about 4 years, Lisa and I, 4 years. But driving home on 167, going north, and I see this car, and whoa, he's crossing over the lane he's not in, and then over the shoulder, and I'm going. So I didn't want to get next to him, so I moved over one more lane. There were 3 lanes at the time, and I'm looking at him, and you know, he's got a ball cap on, and he's driving like this. I mean, he's not texting. He's not looking at the scenery. I said, that guy's under the influence of something. So I called the police and followed him, and he took an exit. I followed him on the exit, and I mean, I don't know how he didn't crash. Sometimes I couldn't see any space between him, his car, and the guardrail. Ah! And so anyway, they catch him, and they asked me, will you testify against him? And of course I will. I don't hate the guy. I want the best for him, but he'd been caught before, And did he kill anybody the first time? And what are the chances that he would kill someone if he stayed on the road too many more times while intoxicated? So they called me and they said, oh, you don't need to testify. I don't know if he pled guilty or what, but he's going to be in jail for a year and a $5,000 fine. Some of you have been drunk before. There's some temporary pleasure in that. Do you think if we were to ask the guy right now, if he was just open and honest and say, hey, Fred, is it worth it? If you would have known ahead of time that you'd end up in jail for a year, lose your license, pay $5,000, would you have driven drunk? Would you have made the same choice? No, we don't know. But chances are he minimized the risk. But we're to count the costs and say, what are the potential hazards? And we're to magnify it. We're to think of the worst case scenario, because sometimes the worst case scenario happens. And so there's one example. Another one, tell a lie, boy, can ruin friendships and destroy trust and cost a job and all this kind of thing. Count the cost. I'm tempted to do this. What's the worst case scenario? And what would God want me to do? Doing 90 miles an hour on the freeway, that's, if you go, I think it's, unless the laws change, if you go 25 miles an hour faster than the speed limit, it's called reckless, not negligent, but it's reckless driving. I believe, if I recall correctly, last time I was jailed for it, never jailed for it, but I believe that if you go 90 on the freeway in a 60 mile an hour, that it's a felony. You'll lose your license. It used to be jail time. I'm assuming it's still. Is that worth it? Is it fun to go fast? Sure, but what if you get a blowout and you lose control? One of your tires explodes. Just when we're tempted, and when I sin, when I blow it, usually in the heat of the moment, no thought behind it, no predecision, and I haven't counted the cost and then magnified it. Here's how bad. Looked at it closely. Here's how bad it could be. So count the cost and magnify it. All right. The devil's going to attack. He attacks every day. And when he does, be ready. Move the line to where you can handle it. Count the cost. See it for what it really is. Magnified. The last one is plan your escape. We had our reading. Thank you, Elliot. And Joseph, he was a slave for Potiphar, sold by his brothers, and everything he did prospered his master. So his master gave him full reign, full charge of everything he had except for his wife. And it came about in verse 7. This is Genesis 39. It came about after these events that his master's wife, verse 6. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. My wife tells me that I remind her a lot of Joseph. Kidding. She's never said that. But he's handsome in form and appearance, and it came about after these events, all his successes and his freedom, that his master's wife looked at with desire of Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he refused. Shall he commit this great sin against God, is what he said. How could I do this great and evil sin against God? Verse 9. He's all alone. No one's going to find out, right? All the men of the house, they were outside. He could blame God. It's your fault that I'm a slave. I don't deserve to be here. I just feel like doing this. Ever do that? Ever sin because you're angry at your circumstances or angry at God and you want to self-medicate? It's a common thing. Some people use their disappointments to justify their disobedience. So Joseph did not. It's easy to give in when we're not prepared. Joseph told her, no deal. Your husband trusts me and I'm not going to sin against God. He resisted. Did the temptation stop? Did it stop? Day after day, she hit on Joseph. Day after day. And day after day, the devil tries to wear us down. No different. We know his schemes. He doesn't quit. Resist, but that doesn't mean the temptation completely goes away. It may be for a while that it does. It may be in this circumstance that it does. But he tries to wear us down. She was persistent, no sign of backing off. Every day she tempted Joseph. And there must have been more temptation. Like, man, she's married to my master. I mean, how can she ruin my life? I mean, there's a lot of things that would go through a rational person's mind. But Joseph was wise enough to plan his escape. It's going to happen tomorrow and the next day. She's just going to keep coming after me. Genesis 39:12. She caught him by his garment and lie with me. And he left his garment, his outer garment, some verses say, in her hand, and he fled and he went outside. Better to have a good name than a good coat. He had predecided that if she grabs me, I run, I escape, I do whatever I have to do. But this is a pre-decision. It's quite clear from the scriptures. If you're not strong enough to resist it, run from it. Run from it. There are certain situations I just don't put in my way. I told you about my weakness at the dessert table at the potlucks. So what I do now, because sugar and gluten, they hammer me. They really, they hurt me. And so I tell myself, okay, you can have a dessert today. One, that's it. I kind of make a personal vow, I'll have one. And I honor that. And that's just a silly example of something we could do in any realm of life. But let's say that your job is just full of temptation and not good for your soul. Change jobs. Change friends. Change what you do for fun and where you go and who you hang with. I know that many of you could preach the same sermon. I get that. But that doesn't mean that many of us don't need to hear it. This is helpful to most of us to pre-decide what we should do in case of temptation. 1 Corinthians 10:13, that God is faithful. Love that. God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will provide the way of escape also, so that you will be able to do it. The key is that God is faithful. He is on our side. He is for you, for you, for you. He wants the best, but He's going to let you mature. He's going to let you decide, you want to be holy or worldly? You want to honor Him or fill self-desires that in the end are very harmful? He lets us decide, but He will give the way of escape. There isn't a situation you've been in where He didn't provide the way of escape, because He's faithful and on our side. And in the Lord's Prayer, you know, when Jesus, the disciples teach us to pray, after He, hallowed be thy name, He honored God, He said, do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Prayer isn't one we're going to study today, but it's a critical part to everything we do, our relationship and walking with God. And Jesus says, pray, don't lead us to temptation, but deliver us from evil. Deliver doesn't mean you want to be exposed to it, but He'll give you the way of escape. He'll give you the access. Pray for readiness. Pray for the ability to pre-decide on those things that trouble us. Pray for wisdom to recognize the best escape. So why resist a temptation in the future? Why get to the point where you have to resist it if we had the power to eliminate it today? By pre-decision, by moving the line, or counting the cost. And that isn't for me. But why resist a temptation in the future unexpectedly and getting caught off guard when we have the power to pre-decide and eliminate it today? So pre-decide when possible. Decisions aren't based on emotions in the moment, not good ones, but on the values God placed on our hearts. We develop those values, and even when that surprise comes along, even if Satan catches us off guard unexpectedly, when our values are clear, decisions are far easier. So, in overcoming temptation, be honest to yourself about where you're vulnerable. How does the devil attack you? What catches you off guard sometimes? Remember that God's faithfulness and protection. Remember them and call on Him to help you. Move the line, count the cost, and then magnify it to what it really is, and then plan your escape. That's our lesson for today. Thank you so much for being here. Hope there was some value for you in this, and pre-deciding how we're going to handle events that we know are going to come up again and again in our lives. If you have some kind of spiritual need, if you'd like to become a child of God today, if you know what to do that, if you have prayer requests, whatever your needs are, we'd love to help you in that. We're going to stand now, if you will, and sing the song of invitation.